Well, good morning, and thank you all for coming. I'm happy to be here with the Minister of Affordability and Utilities, Nathan Neudorf, as well as Parliamentary Secretary for, do we call it for electricity?
I think so.
Chantelle de Jonge. You'll have to tell us what your title is, Chantelle. And to announce more of our plans to make life in Alberta more affordable. Living in Canada has gotten very expensive lately. The housing crisis, the federal carbon tax, and a dollar that's worth less and less because Ottawa is running the money printers nonstop. All these factors have made life less affordable across the country. For places which is Canada, it's hard to believe that middle-class families might struggle to afford household basics like heat and power. But that's the situation for millions of Canadians in 2024. Keeping life affordable for Albertans is one of our government's top priorities, and that includes the price of electricity. Minister Neudorf has been working hard to bring power costs down. And today I'm happy to announce our first steps to return to a time of affordable electricity and give Albertans clarity and certainty on their power options. The default power rate in our province is called the regulated rate option. And when Albertans go to sign up for their electricity, more often than not, they're automatically enrolled in this option. The rate adjusts every month based on what's happening with electricity prices, and that means price volatility and price spikes. Since the regulated rate option is the standard rate for households who aren't signed up with a competitive power retailer, a significant percentage of Alberta families, businesses, and farm operations get their electricity this way. But calling it the regulated rate option is misleading. It makes it sound stable and predictable, when the truth is it is exactly the opposite. The power rate swings wildly from month to month, depending on the weather and what's going on in the world. It can be relatively affordable during one part of the year and then crushingly expensive in another. Albertans should not dread opening their bill each month. Unpredictable power costs make it hard for families to plan their household budgets. That makes it hard to have certainty for the future. And it doesn't help matters that the most volatile option sounds like the best one and is the default option. For the last year, we've been encouraging Albertans to get off the regulated rate option and choose a more affordable and stable rate. And tens of thousands of Albertans have switched so far. But we recognize that the regulated rate option still sounds confusingly appealing. It sounds like a sensible choice in uncertain times. So to make things absolutely and perfectly clear, we will be renaming the regulated rate option to the rate of last resort. We think this will send the right message to Albertans, that this is the rate to sign up for only when there are no other options available, because everyone in our province could use some clarity and certainty about cost right now. So a name change, of course, is one thing, but a name change in itself doesn't get us to where we need to be. That's why we're also making changes to the rate itself. The rate of last resort will be set every 2 years for each provider. So customers have far fewer price spikes and far more certainty about the cost that they'll have to pay. For example, in 2023, the average price of the regulated rate option was 22 cents per kilowatt hour due to spikes in electricity. However, if we had had this new policy in place, the Market Surveillance Administrator estimated the average price would have been half as expensive, at 11 cents per kilowatt hour. When we consider only the electricity cost of your monthly bill, that would mean that this new policy would have cut those costs in half. The Alberta Utilities Commission estimates that over the course of a year, the average Alberta household uses 600 kilowatt hours of electricity per month. With the numbers from the Market Surveillance Administrator that I just cited, our new policy would have resulted in average electricity costs being $66 per month instead of $132 per month. That's about $792 in savings per year. In addition, anyone who signs on to the rate of last resort will be able to choose a different competitive rate plan at any time. This will essentially become the price to beat. We'll also be requiring power providers to inform customers exactly what rate they're on and to advise them that they can leave for a competitive rate at any time they choose. We simply can't allow confusion about electricity billing to cause Albertans financial hardship. We're only a few months removed from both bitterly cold temperatures of -30 and below, or blistering hot temperatures of 30 degrees and higher. These temperatures regularly create spikes in demand, which result in spikes in electricity rates and in consumer bills. And they hurt the most financially vulnerable among us, including seniors and others on fixed income, those with poor credit who could not get onto a fixed rate, renters, and others with difficult financial situations. But that's going to change, and we continue as we continue our work to make power more affordable to Albertans. Now I'd like to invite Minister Neudorf to share more.
Thank you for that introduction, Premier Smith, and your words. Making life more affordable for all Albertans has been and continues to be our top priority. We have taken an all-government approach in addressing electricity prices has been my focus. By lowering the cost of utilities, we are directly making a difference for every single Albertan. While the federal government is continuing to make power bills more expensive with their carbon tax, our government is doing everything we possibly can to help Albertans save their hard-earned dollars. Utility bills can make or break a tight budget when every penny counts. As the Premier mentioned, we are renaming the default electricity rate to the rate of last resort to allow consumers to better understand the rate they are paying and encourage them to find the best rate option for themselves. Knowledge is power, and Albertans need to know their options. By requiring power providers to inform their customers exactly what rate they are on, and requiring providers to give Albertans information on how to access the Utilities Consumer Advocates resources, we are ensuring that Albertans can take advantage of the benefits of our province's unique deregulated market. Our competitive market structure gives Albertans the power to choose the best energy providers, plans, and payment options to fit their needs. These new policies also make the default electricity price the rate to beat and encourage even greater competition within our market. By encouraging competition, these policies will help make Albertans' bills more affordable by putting downward pressure on the price of utilities. However, not only do we have to lower the cost of these bills, but we need to ensure that Albertans who are unable to sign a competitive contract are protected from sudden spikes in pricing. In some rural areas, the default electricity rate may be a consumer's only option to receive power. For those who have poor credit or other financial difficulties, such as seniors and other vulnerable populations, signing a competitive contract may not be possible. While we encourage all Albertans to move off the rate of last resort, we know that that's not a possibility for everyone, and we are ensuring that those people are also protected. Electricity is not a luxury, but a basic life necessity, and I strongly encourage those who are looking for assistance with their utility bills or are experiencing a dispute with their power provider to contact the Utilities Consumer Advocate. By making these changes, our government is increasing competition, lowering and stabilizing Albertans' power bills, and helping make sure that Albertans are informed about their choices. I want to thank the RO Working Group for their recommendations on helping better inform Albertans of their choices, and thank the Market Surveillance Administrator for working to provide us with the modeling on how these changes will impact prices. Albertans can anticipate seeing these changes introduced with greater detail through legislation and regulations this spring and summer, and we intend to have them come into effect on January 1st, 2025. Our government is working to make our electricity system more affordable and reliable for all Albertans, and I look forward to announcing the next steps very, very soon. Thank you very much.
And with that, we'll take questions now. We'll go with one question, one follow-up. We'll start off here in the room before making our way to the phones, and we'll go to you first, Michelle.
Minister, I wonder if you could tell me a little more detail about how this rate will be set every 2 years. Like, why every 2 years? What is it based on? Just kind of the nuts and bolts.
Sure. Currently, under the RO, the ISO sets the price, and providers are allowed to purchase that electricity up to 120 days or 3 months in advance. Giving them the ability to buy up to 2 years will stabilize that price. It's just like a variable mortgage to a fixed price mortgage, and the details of that will come out in regulation.
And as a follow-up, is this grandfather? So say if I'm somebody who's currently on the regulated rate option, would I be able to get off that option when this comes into effect? And you also said that some people would have to stay on that. Can you tell me more about that?
Certainly. So Individuals who may be on it, they could be on it for a variety of reasons. One, they're new to Alberta and they haven't had the opportunity to do a credit check or check out the market. They could have a poor credit rating at this point and not qualify for another fixed rate option, or they just don't know. In particular, many seniors who've been on their utility bill providers list for many years don't even know that. So this will first be a step of informing all consumers what rate they are on and what that means. And then the requirement to retailers is that after a certain period of time, 90 days if you sign up new or if you're currently on it, they have to go back to each consumer and say, do you know what rate you're on? Do you know what that means? Would you like to choose? Or here are the options for you. And that's a significant difference. So yes, all consumers should be made aware of what rate they are on and what options they have.
Perfect. And we'll go to Catherine.
Yeah, so currently the RRO, there's sort of the short-term and long-term forecasting. So how does that factor in? Because sometimes plants are down for maintenance, sometimes it's an emergency thing, sometimes it's super cold, a very cold winter that you can't predict. Like how does that all factor into this 2-year period?
Sure. So the ISO will continue to do the work that they do on that and do their forecasting, but the price certainty comes again from, instead of only being able to buy 3 months ahead, they can buy out to 2 years ahead, and that will moderate and soften that change. So they will have pre-purchased the electricity. So a spike in 1 month will have a much more limited impact over the 2 years as it would have had within the 3 months. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and generally, I guess, like you had the analogy of a fixed rate versus variable rate mortgage. A lot of the time, you can get a variable rate mortgage and it evens out to be cheaper than the fixed rate. So can you explain kind of?
Certainly, and that's what we had in the RO over the past 25 years. There were many times where it was lower, but when it went up very rapidly and very high, which we saw last summer. That volatility, many individuals within Alberta, somewhere between 600 and 700,000 Albertans were on the RO last summer, and they only realized it when they started getting bills that were multiples times higher than what they were expecting. And then it was too late for them to change. This would soften that impact and, again, better inform them of what rate they're on. There are many people who would choose to be on a variable rate, but they have the financial wherewithal to withstand those sudden changes. There are many on the RO who don't have that ability. So this seeks to protect them, as well as many in rural Alberta don't have any other options. The default rate is their only rate. And we think we need to serve them better by allowing them more options within the default rate.
And Minister, just to point out, the variable rate still exists as a contract. You
Exactly.
still have the option if you want the volatility and you want to take that risk. Why don't
Yeah.
you just
Yeah, so there are 3 options for you. There is a default rate, and then there are many competitive price options, typically within 2 categories, one being fixed, different lengths of term, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year options, and variable rates, different options as well. And as we continue to progress down this road, we do hope to also include eventually time of use options, which allow for a lot more flexibility. But this is meant to protect those that don't have other options or maybe in a place where they don't qualify yet for some of those competitive rates.
And then we'll go Lisa, Shay, Jonathan.
I was just wondering, Premium, you mentioned that tens of thousands of people have already switched over away from the RRO. Can you give us an idea? I think the Market Surveillance Administrator has these numbers, but can you give us an idea of the percentage of Albertans who are still on RRO and who are on, where is everybody?
So we're typically plus or minus 30% of Albertans are on the RRO for a number of different reasons. Obviously, in the last couple of years, we've seen an incredible increase of population, people moving to Alberta, and virtually all of them would at least begin on the RRO. So while many hundreds of thousands of people moved off due to their price spikes last year, the population coming in has balanced that out. So historically, we saw as high as 45% of Albertans on the RRO. Now we're just less than 30%, but we think that there will always be a market presence due to natural fluctuations with population and other reasons where somewhere between 25 and 30% of the population would be on the default rate.
And what kind of consultation did you do with the power producers on this? Because if like, do they have an option to participate or not participate? Is this going to affect their bottom line, essentially, for their profit making?
Not so much for the power producers, because they continue to generate and price into the market. This may have an impact on retailers, but again, the Premier in her wisdom has set up an RO working group who did a lot of engagement with all of those entities, and they provided information to this. Their number one recommendation was changing the name so people are more aware of the product that they're receiving. And we continue to engage with stakeholders all the time in developing the outgoing regulations.
Yeah, we're hearing from people who are very much struggling with this issue today and anticipate very high bills going into what could be a very hot summer. I guess what in today's announcement does anything in the immediate term before next January?
Again, this is giving them hope for the future more than making any changes. Obviously, we have to pass through legislation and make sure regulations come in place. They'll be there for January 1st. We are very aware that the forward pricing trends continue to go down, and we see many competitive retailers already offering below 10 cents a kilowatt hour, including some at about 7.7 cents a kilowatt hour. It is doing what we anticipate it to do. All of these measures help stabilize that pricing and will enshrine it in legislation for next year.
And just as a follow-up, we're hearing people complain about things like distribution fees and other little fees on their bills that add up, sometimes almost more than electricity costs themselves. I guess what is being done on that front?
Continued work. We look forward to making announcements in the future. We are working on distribution, transmission, and generation, obviously. This is just one step of many in making sure that we address the needs of all of Albertans.
Jonathan?
Okay, so Jonathan Bradley, Western Standard. So my question is about the name change to the rate of last resort. I'm not sure if it's either you, parents, or your Premier Smith, but how is that name change decided on?
Again, the RO working group came forward with a number of different names, and this one we think will grab the attention of consumers the most and help inform them of the true nature of the rate, as the Premier stated, and that's why it was chosen. Again, information and informing consumers is very high priority within this suite of changes.
Okay, and my follow-up pertains, so with the electricity rates, obviously there's a bunch of reasons why they've skyrocketed in Alberta for the last few years, but one of them was when the Alberta NDP decided to phase out coal, and that affected the rates. Could you see your government, say in the next few years, trying to bring coal back online, or why not?
That's not currently contemplated. Many of these plants have already undergone a transition away from coal to natural gas, so we wouldn't want to strand those assets. We continue to work with industry the best path forward, but becoming carbon neutral by 2050 is still our goal, and we think that we can move in that direction. And while we're looking at all types of power generation, from geothermal, renewables, dispatchable, we want to reduce our emissions in every way possible.
Thank you.
And we're going to head over to the phones now. Operator, can you put through our first caller, please?
Martin Joanne, CTV. Hi there. My question here, I'm wondering, as competitive rates are lower than the RRO, people are leaving the RRO, and they're leaving a smaller pool of people behind to hold the bag on paying off that loan that was used to cap the RRO before. I'm wondering, how does this impact lower income Albertans who don't have the credit to leave the RRO? Could this be problematic if they're forced to have to pay off those additional loan costs?
We don't anticipate it impacting them negatively. We are still on target to have that repayment come off at the end of this year, and which leaves us only about 7 months or so to do that. And as stated earlier, while many people are leaving the RRO for more competitive rates if they're able to, we still have a huge influx of people moving to Alberta and often end up on that. So we're seeing a fairly stable financial situation. We can readdress at the end of the year when we see the conclusion of that program, but at this point we don't anticipate it negatively impacting anybody in the long run.
And do you have a follow-up, Mark?
Nope, that's good. Thank you.
Perfect. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Kelly Kreiderman, Globe and Mail.
Hi, Premier. I wanted to ask you about Bill 18. And, you've made various statements about the logic behind the bill. Is it about having a federal government whose ideology differs from York, or is it about the jurisdictional questions that you talked about?
It's both, all of the above. In the first case, I can tell you, I just had another meeting with the Council of the Federation this morning, and the consistent message all of the premiers have is how frustrating it is that the federal government has a huge list of tasks that are in their area of jurisdiction, and yet they keep wanting to interfere in ours and tell us what to do and dictate to us what the programs will be. So I think you'll see a statement on that very shortly. So that's one part. But the other part is that in a handful of areas, we know that the federal government's approach is completely at odds with ours. For instance, I've mentioned many times in the legislature, Dr. Sylvain Charlebois talking about a massive research program to support the carbon tax, and that other research is not being funded that questions whether the carbon tax is actually making food production more expensive. There have been professors from time to time saying that they're not allowing or not getting research grants when they say that they want to hire people on the basis of merit. I made a reference to that in the chamber yesterday of a professor all the way back in 2021 who kept saying, even though he was of Indian origin, because he said he was hiring people on merit, he had several research grants refused. He believes that there's an ideology that goes behind the funding that does not allow for full and robust debate at universities. So that's one area. Another area, of course, is safe supply. We've made no bones about the fact that we don't think that there's such a thing as safe supply of heroin or crystal meth. We certainly don't want to go down the path of British Columbia, where nurses are now expected in the name of harm reduction to fill people's crack pipes and aren't allowed to confiscate weapons or stop their drug dealer from coming into the rooms. That's an ideology that is supported by the federal government. We simply are not going to have them working around on social agencies that we fund and are our jurisdiction to try to implement a policy that is foundationally opposed to what it is that we want to do. So I would say it's both of those things.
And do you have a follow-up, Kelly?
I do. What are the concerns from academics, especially in this province, that could enact a chill on research that they might want to pursue that might go against the provincial government of the day's thinking on a particular issue? You've been very concerned about academic freedom throughout your political career. Isn't there concern about this legislation producing a chilling effect on true academic research?
There already is a chilling effect. There already is a certain perspective that's funded and another perspective that's not. There already is graduate students and professors saying that they're not allowed to speak freely. So that the chill is already there. What we're trying to do is to understand just how much of that is being funded by the federal government so that we can address it. There's a couple ways we can address it. One way is to look at the per capita amount of grants coming here and see if we're getting our fair share. That's what we do with all of our programs. And I bet you dollars to donuts that we are not getting our fair share of per capita funding. So that would be one way. But the other way is that we could also establish our own research programs to make sure that we're providing that kind of balance. It should be no secret. From the very beginning with this government, and this predates me, we've been very concerned about having academic freedom and student free speech at universities. It's part of the reason the previous advanced education minister announced that we are adopting the Chicago principles of ensuring that there's a free, robust debate happening on campuses. So I would say this is just an extension of us looking at making sure that we maintain that environment. Academia is ground zero in shaping public opinion, because it's the professors who are out there doing media commentary. They're part of the commentariat. They're the ones training the young minds who are going to come out and be in the culture and ideas shaping world. It's vitally important that we have balance in that area, and quite frankly, we just don't. And so that's what we want to make sure that we're contributing to a robust, fair, open discussion at universities.
Thanks, Kelly. Operator, can you put through our next caller, please?
Rick Bell, Calgary Sun.
Good morning, or I should say good afternoon, Premier. I have a question from Calgary, where it seems to be there's never a dull moment. And the question is, Calgary's brand of the price tag of $4.8 million, Calgary's brand is changing from being part of the energy to Blue Sky City, largely because it is said that we don't want Calgary identified as much as an oil and gas city. And number two, that apparently people outside Calgary, or outside Alberta, I should say, see Calgary as not being as inclusive enough. And even though at least the initial returns show that a lot of Calgarians can't figure out why it's becoming Blue Sky City, what are your thoughts about the $4.8 million grant makeover for the city?
Well, I personally like Be Part of the Energy. I thought it was really clever because not only is it a reference to the energy sector, but it's also it conveys the vibrancy of the city of Calgary. And let's remember, energy in all its forms are needed to fuel everything, including the tech industry, which needs artificial intelligence and data banks and all of that computer programming and data management supported by energy. So I know that Calgary has an interest in attracting from across the entire spectrum. So do we. So I just don't know that the new, what is it? The Blue Sky City, that could be anywhere. Whereas Be Part of the Energy, that actually says something about the character and nature of Calgary. So if it is the case that somebody's embarrassed by that, that's pretty disappointing. I'm not embarrassed at all. I love the fact that I can go around the world and talk about the fact that we are an energy superpower and we also have a diversified economy. They just maybe need better arguments so that they can counteract any of the criticism. I would say as well, I don't see it impairing the ability of Alberta to attract people. We had over 200,000 people come to this province last year, and a goodly share of them went to Calgary. So I think maybe they're misjudging what they're saying to the world with a change like that.
And following that, you talk to potential investors in Alberta and potential investors looking at Calgary a lot. How often do you run into an investor who says, I don't want to invest in Calgary because it's too much identified as an oil and gas city, or it's too much identified with cowboys, or it's not inclusive enough, so I think I'm going to take a pass and invest somewhere else, or four, I can't invest in a place that has a brand that's Be Part of the Energy? How often do you encounter people who say any of those four things?
Not once yet.
Perfect. Thanks, Rick. And we have time for a few more questions. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Colin Gallant, Medicine Hat News.
Good morning, or afternoon, thanks. I'm just calling from another dimension of power pricing in Medicine Hat, and wondering if the Minister can tell me if there's any specific study or examination happening with power prices in Medicine Hat, and whether or not this RRO last resort switch will also apply to natural gas.
Well, let me talk about electricity for a moment, because my understanding is there's many jurisdictions that set what they have called the regulated rate option based on what is done at the provincial level. And I think Medicine Hat is one of them, but certainly our rural electrification associations are as well. That's one of the factors that the minister had to consider, is that there are a number of different entities that rely on that to set the rates. And if that is the case still with Medicine Hat Power, then this will allow them to have that rate of last resort as one of their options as well, set on the same terms. But I'll ask the minister to respond on the gas side. And correct me if my understanding is incorrect.
No, Premier, you're exactly right. So Medicine Hat is a unique jurisdiction and will retain their ability to set their own prices. This will provide them additional flexibility to continue to follow the new rate of last resort and the stabilization factors that it can provide. It does not apply to natural gas at this time.
And I mean, we've got about 80 natural gas.
Yeah. Follow up?
Yes, I'm also just wondering, the RRO rate was sort of flagged as a problem in late 2022. We had a cap in 2023. Now we're, into 2024. Why is this just being dealt with now?
Well, we had an election at the beginning of 2023. We began work on it in the summer of 2023. We actually had legislation drafted for the fall, and as it went through the internal procedure, it was requested to be removed from an omnibus bill to stand alone. We didn't have the time to introduce it as a standalone bill in the fall, which is why we brought it forward as quickly as we could in this session. So we've been at work on it for quite some time. It's just a legislative process that this is where it ended up as quickly as we could bring it forward.
Thanks, Colin. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Jennifer Lee, BC. Hi,
Hi, thanks for taking my question. And this is for the Premier, and it's regarding the NICU situation in Alberta. As you know, a group of Edmonton doctors sent a letter to the Health Minister this week. They talked about the situation in the NICUs being a crisis due to a lack of staffing and beds. They sent briefing notes, they say in 2022, 23, and we now know that specialists from both Calgary and Edmonton sent a letter to the Health Minister this February, so just a couple of months ago, outlining their concerns, asking for meetings. Now, the Minister's office confirmed this morning they did indeed receive that February letter, that it was being investigated. But it wasn't until this week's letter, which, as you know, was made public, that the Minister expedited that work. And I think the concern is that their concerns weren't really taken seriously until now. So why hasn't the government acted sooner to address these issues that have been outlined by doctors? And why did it take a public letter, really, to make that happen?
Well, look, the approach that we're taking with Alberta Health Services is that we know we've got to get them back to doing their core business. Their core business is taking care of emergency patients, emergency surgeries, and that's the entire reason behind our refocusing, is that we are concerned that if we have patients in hospital who should be in other types of facilities, that's pulling staff away from the absolute urgent and emergent needs that happen, which includes in intensive care, and it includes in the NICU and dealing with these very vulnerable babies. So so from a larger perspective, we've observed that this has been the problem with Alberta Health Services, is that they've been operating in crisis mode year after year after year, and it puts those emergent needs at risk. So the whole focusing has been centered around that. On this issue in particular, I understand that the minister assigned it to an ADM to figure out how we would be able to address the staffing needs. I think there'll be more to say on that very shortly. I'll let the minister talk a bit more about that. But we monitor the bed space every day. I mean, I get an acute care report every single day. And one of the things I can tell you is that as we look at these NICU beds, on April 18th, this is most recent data, there were 17 NICU beds available in Edmonton zone, 27 in Calgary zone, 6 in Red Deer, 13 in South Zone, and 5 in Grand Prairie. And they change every day because as these little ones recover and are able to move into less acuity, or they're able to move home, sometimes the beds open up. If there's a particular number of babies who are born with the higher needs, then the numbers go down. So we are always monitoring to make sure that we have enough space. I didn't do the addition on that, but yesterday I think they'd said, you can probably add that up. Yeah, yesterday we'd said that it was 48 beds open. I can see now we've got significantly more than 48 beds open. And so that is something that we will always monitor. You always want babies to be treated in their home community because you want the parents and family to be able to be supported and around them. And the numbers that we're seeing has meant that we haven't had to move any patients. As I think the minister mentioned, the last time patients did have to be moved was 7 years ago. So I would say that our frontline workers are doing a tremendous job of being able to manage that patient flow. And if we need to have more staffing there to ensure that we can take some of the pressure off, that's what we're going to do. That's the whole reason for the refocusing, is to make sure that acute care nurses and doctors are doing acute care, as opposed to all of the other types of care that can be done in other types of facilities.
And do you have a follow-up, Jennifer?
I do, thanks. Yeah, so I think I hear what you're saying about the numbers, the bed numbers. But I think, what I'm hearing from frontline staff is they're kind of pushing back against that, saying, there may be beds open, but there aren't always staff to staff those beds. So the numbers may show that there's beds available for these critically ill babies, but they aren't always usable because there just aren't the people there to treat these kids. They also say that there is like a safe level, a safe capacity level above which it's not really a good idea to go, and that these NICUs are all often or frequently well above that 80 to 85% capacity level. So I guess, how do you respond to that? There's pushback there. And also, if you are talking about bringing staff, like, when are you going to do that? How quickly can you get people in, and what specifically are you going to do to make that happen?
Well, I think that 85% target is the target we want to get to across the entire health system. So I don't think that I wouldn't dispute their observation about that. When I first came in and started looking at these numbers, it was routine to see capacity over 100% for long periods of time, and especially during the COVID crisis. You can't operate at 100% of the time, all the time, month in, month out, year in, year out. It just burns people out. And in addition, when you get into fall respiratory virus season, if you don't have extra capacity, then you end up overburdening your front line, asking for more overtime. If you don't have extra capacity, then you can't increase the level of elective surgeries either. So our entire approach that we're taking is we've got to move non-critical patients into more appropriate facilities, whether it's assisted living or continuing care or mental health beds or addiction beds, or even into supportive living in their own home environment, so that those beds become available so that all the staff can be supported in doing the acute care. I completely agree. And so we've been watching as these numbers have begun to stabilize, but there's more work to do. And part of that is we're just beginning the new budget year as well on April the 1st. We had a number of agreements that we were signing with the federal government to see more dollars flow, and so we have the ability now to do some of this additional reinvestment. So I suspect that you will see Minister LaGrange make some announcements very soon, because when she assigned this to the ADM to take a look into, when she received that letter, they had already identified that this was an issue, and we're working on it. And so I'll put it to the minister about the specifics on. I think they're asking for 2.5 full-time equivalents in this particular case, but we have to, of course, make sure that we've got staffing levels that are appropriate across all of our facilities.
Thank you, and that's all the time we have for questions.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us.